screen. Okay, so do you guys see this terminal? No. Go to the other folder. Okay, good. Thank you. So, why is it not resizing? So the window is taking time to resize. Let me. Okay, I think it will try all the sizes before getting to the right. Okay, well, at least it's working. Good. So, no. So this one. Okay, this time it's better. So last time we were doing templates. We had started templates. We had seen how you can declare class templates and function templates. Okay, and before that we had discussed what is the benefit of using templates and what under which situations you can use templates. So the idea was that if you have code which basically is useful or which will be used with multiple types, then instead of writing that code for all the types, copy pasting that code and modifying the type, etc., you just write that code once, and basically that code is written independent of the type. Okay, so you just assume a type T, and based on that type T, you write that code, and then basically when you use, this will be a template. So when you use this template, you give it the type at that time at the use. Okay, so at that time, based on that type, the compiler will use this template to generate the code for that particular type, and then it will compile and use that code wherever you used it. So you wrote that template code only once, but you can basically use it for any number of types, and it will be instantiated, or the code will be generated for all those types at compile time. So this saves you effort in terms of duplicating that code for each time, multiple types. Okay, and not only it saves you the effort of duplication, but it also reduces the risk of bugs, because whenever you want to change anything in that code, you will have to make that change in all the copies. Okay? But the advantage of having a template is that since template is located at only one location, so if you make a change, you make that change at only that one location. So let me open the file that we had. I think it was copy template. So we had this class myArray, which was originally for integers, but we made a template out of this class, and that way we can use this class myArray as an array of integers, characters, employees, etc. Similarly, we had this function Yes, we had this function bubble sort, which originally was being used to sort an array of integers only. But since sorting can be done on anything, characters, employees, etc., so we would like a generic function where basically which can be used to sort arrays of any type. So then basically we made a template out of this function, and this way we can use this function for any type, not only for integers but also for characters, employees, etc., and it will sort the array accordingly. So any questions regarding templates? Class templates or function templates? So last time we were in a hurry because you had a lab. So I wanted to fit that vector thing also so that you get familiar with that before the lab. So it might be that some people may have missed some things in these templates. So if you have any questions or confusions, you can ask now. Did anybody try templates? I mean, the lab was on templates, so I think you might have tried that in lab. So did anybody try making a class template or function template and then using that template with different types in their program? You guys didn't do the lab yesterday? Hello, can you guys hear me? Okay, so I'll come to your question, but first let me ask, did you guys do the lab yesterday? Okay, good. So, okay, so if you have any questions regarding templates, you can ask now. So Mohammed Par's question is very good, that templates are also called, I mean, this phenomenon of instantiating templates or generating code at compile time, it's also called compile time polymorphism. So the idea is that, again, and just like polymorphism that we studied earlier, using the base pointer, the base class pointer. So Rishan, if you could mute, let me mute you. Thank you. So the polymorphism that we studied earlier, which was basically using the base class pointer, and that base class pointer is pointing to an object of the derived class. So we can use that base class pointer to call a derived class version of the virtual function. So that we call it polymorphism, but it's called dynamic polymorphism to be more precise. So we are using the same pointer, base class pointer, to call the different versions of that virtual function depending on the derived class type. So polymorphism, as I said, multiple forms. We are accessing those multiple forms of virtual functions using the same base pointer. That is runtime polymorphism. These templates are called compile time polymorphism. Okay, why? Because we are using this one template to generate codes for multiple types. Okay, so at compile time, this one template will be used to generate code based on this template for multiple types, employee, integer, character, etc. So again, it's kind of the same phenomena, using one template to create multiple forms or multiple generated code, etc. So this is also polymorphism, but this polymorphism happens at compile time. Okay? So this is called compile time polymorphism. Now the question, what's the benefit of a runtime polymorphism, which is better? The thing is, these two are different things, okay, and they are applicable in different situations. So we cannot compare them directly and say that this thing is better, okay, that runtime is better or compile time is better. You have to identify your need, the situation that you are in, and based on that situation, you will basically select, or you will be automatically dictated that let's say if the thing is happening at runtime, then you can't use templates polymorphism or compile type polymorphism to do that, and vice versa. Okay, so it will be automatically clear to you which one you should choose and use. So they are not directly comparable in terms of which is better and which is not. It's just that you have to see the situation under which you are, and based on that situation, you are going to basically use the polymorphism. For example, the compile time polymorphism or template polymorphism happens at compile time. So if you have something which will be decided at runtime, for example, based on the user input, let's say if user enters 1, you assign the employee class address to a pointer, or if the user enters 2, you basically assign the manager class address to the pointer. So this is something that is not known at compile time. Okay, so this pointer, which function will this pointer call? We don't know this at compile time, because at runtime the user is deciding by pressing 1 or 2 to assign, which address to assign to this pointer. So since this information is not known at compile time, so we cannot use compile time polymorphism for this kind of thing. So we are forced to use runtime polymorphism in this situation, okay? And that's what we studied earlier. Similarly, the compile time polymorphism is used to generate these different versions of code for different types. Okay? So let's say this function, what's it called, bubble sort. Okay? So this bubble sort template, it is being used to sort arrays of integers or employees. So when we use this function at compile time, we will be giving it the type of function that we want this function to use. Okay, so that information is known at compile time. So the compiler has enough information to generate the appropriate code by instantiating this function bubble sort template to generate the bubble sort code for employee, sorting employees. So this kind of under this kind of situation, we are going to use compile time polymorphism. Okay, so in this example, for example, this function template bubble sort, there is no notion of inheritance or base class, derived class, etc., etc. So there is no like reason or no what should I call it? I mean, there is no sense of talking about runtime polymorphism here. Okay, so these things are not directly comparable. Based on the situation and our needs, we will basically choose runtime or compile time polymorphism. They're both called polymorphism, but if we think about, they are not exactly the same thing. One is generating code, and one is just during execution calling the appropriate function. Does this make sense? Okay, good. So, Hamza, you said you tried it with int and float. That's good, but you should also try these things with user-defined types, with your own defined types, right? Because there are some things that are that will work by default for basic types, int and float. They are assignable, comparable, etc., etc. So you can use this comparison operators, assignment operators on built-in types by default. But for user-defined types, you might not have defined certain operations. Okay, so that will also, I mean, when the error message comes, that will help you realize that yes, in this template I am using the lesson operator, but I have not defined the lesson operator for my user defined type. So that way you will be forced to define that operator for your user defined type. So this way you will also practice operator overloading, and also I think you will learn more about templates also if you use templates with your user defined type. So the auto thing, we'll come to auto in a while. Okay, in this class or in the next class, we'll come to auto. So any other question about template? Okay, so practice templates. Basically, as I showed you in the last class, templates can cause like error messages which are very hard to read, very long error messages. So it might look like very daunting or very difficult, but with practice you will get the hang of it, and there are many advantages of using templates. So try practicing them. And as we discussed in last class, that the C++ standard library, STL, standard template library, is basically written in the form of templates. Okay, so all the functionality that is available, it is written generically, independent of the type, and but we can use that functionality for any type of our choice. So at runtime, we can tell the compiler that we want to use this, sorry, at compile time, we can tell the compiler that we want to use this class for this type of data type. Okay? And then as we know, the appropriate code will be generated based on that class template or function template for that data type, and we can use it in our own program. So standard template library basically provides you lots of functionality which will make your life very easy. So there are data structures, classes, and different algorithms that are provided by the standard template library. So one of the major type of classes or data structures that are provided by the standard template library are called containers. Containers are classes which are used to store data inside them. So previously we have used built-in arrays, so C++ arrays. Arrays, we can declare space for let's say 100 employees, and then we can use arrays to store 100 employees in that array. Okay, so array is kind of a container, but array is inherited from C, and it has certain limitations which we already know that first of all the array size is fixed. You have to specify the size at compile time, and secondly there is no error checking when using an index to access an element of that array. So C++ provides other containers which basically remedy or correct the limitations of arrays. So one of those containers is a vector. Okay? A vector, let me open that vector file again. So somebody's mic is on. Thank you. So vector is again a class or a container which is a template. So we can initialize it using any type. So here, for example, on line number 6, I'm using this vector data type and I'm creating a vector v. Okay. But I'm telling it that I create this vector based on a type int because I intend to store integers in this vector. So what this line will do, it will create an empty vector v. So we can add different integers, store different integers in this vector. So the vector is like an array, but it's better than array in the sense that its size is dynamic. It can expand or shrink based on the number of elements that we have put inside the vector. So that's why in C++, basically it's preferable to use vectors. It gives you more flexibility. It gives you error checking. For example, you can use index checking when accessing elements inside the array, and its performance is as good as the arrays. Okay, and arrays, as I said, are inherited from C, so they are like discouraged in C++ to use because they can cause many errors, subtle errors or bugs in the program. Vectors are encouraged. So far we had not studied vectors, but now that we know about templates, etc., so you can use these STL features in your program more and more. I think it will make your life very much easier. So vector can be declared for any type. Here it's a vector of integers. If you can declare it like this, or we can declare it like this, I think. We can initialize it directly as we used to initialize arrays. Okay. It's again in the syntax like this. Instead of an assignment, we directly initialize it like this. So all these will create vectors. So vectors here, for example, I am adding elements in vector v. So I'm calling this function pushback. Pushback, what it does is it basically adds a new element at the end of the vector. So vector is internally storing these elements. So the new element, it will be added at the end of the already stored elements. If you have to do the same thing in the array, you have to keep track of where the last element is in the array. Okay? And then you will use that value of the index of the last element plus 1 in it, and then store an element after the last element inside the array. Here the thing is, all that tracking is being done for you internally by this vector class. You just tell it to push back this element, and wherever the last element is, after that, this new element will be automatically placed inside the vector. Okay, so it's much easier to use than array. So here we are pushing elements in this V, and then we can basically print this vector. So vectors support this index operator, just like arrays. So we can access the element of an array, element of a vector using these square brackets with an index inside them. So this index, this access is unchecked access. Unchecked access in the sense that if I use these square brackets to access an element of the array, internally the vector will not check whether the index is within the range or not, in the range of elements or not. If you want to use checked access, where it checks for these limitation whether the index is not less than 0 or greater than the size of the vector, then there is another function called at, which we can use to basically size this at. So this does error checking on the index before accessing a vector. So then there is this function popback. Popback will basically remove the last element from the vector. So this is what we did last time. We added some elements inside the vector v. So the vector v basically accommodates all these elements, even though it was declared empty in the start. And then we basically removed some elements from the vector, and we have been printing these vectors for, all the contents of this vector at different points in the program. So let me just compile and run it. So different vectors. In start, the size of vector is 0, and then it basically becomes 10 because we inserted 10 elements inside this vector v. So we print this vector twice, once using the square operator, the square brackets, and then the function at. Okay. And then we pop back certain elements from the vector, and you see that the elements that were popped back, they were popped back from the end of the vector. First 20 was removed, then 19, then 18, then 17, and then 16 was removed. Okay? And the vector was reduced to 5 elements. So this is some of the functionality of the vector. What else can we see inside the vector? So let me open this vector and see what other functionality it is about. Meanwhile, do you have any questions regarding vectors? Let me see. Okay, so I'm going to open that page on Google for STD vector. So it's all part of the standard library. So it is part of the STD namespace, STD vector. So do you have any questions? Other people who have any questions? Let us explore some functionalities of this vector. Okay, so it's a sequence container in the sense that the things are stored inside this container in a sequence. And it dynamically basically changes its size. So internally it is allocating this size dynamically. It's dynamic allocation. At runtime it can change the size of the memory that it is using to store different elements based on a number of elements that we are. I think I should share my desktop. Okay, so that should be good. So what happens is, it is defined as like this. Where is it defined? Yeah. It is defined as this like a template. Okay, it's a class, but this class is being defined as a template. And this template uses this type t, which we are currently using t as an integer. And it basically it can take any type as argument, and it can also take an allocator as an argument. Okay. So allocator is basically, as I said, it internally uses this dynamic memory allocation. So it needs to allocate memory. Okay, so a function or a class that helps in allocating memory is called an allocator. So as you saw that when we declared this vector, we specified the type t, but we did not specify an allocator. Okay. So here, if you see, it is basically saying class allocator is equal to std allocator. Okay. So it's using a default argument for allocator, which means if we do not specify our own allocator, it will use this standard library allocator. And the standard library allocator is basically what we have been using, new and delete function, you know. So that's the allocator for the standard library. So if we do not specify an allocator, it will use the default standard library allocator, which is good for us for the moment. Okay. Later on, you will learn that you can customize, make your own allocators, and if you want, you can use these vectors with your own customized allocators. But that is something that we do not need to worry about at this stage. So there you go. You have these. So basically these reference sites, they give you all the details about the interface about these classes, okay, and STL classes. So here it is telling you the member types that are available for this vector. and then it has constructors, and these operators are defined for this vector: constructor, destructor, assignment operator, etc. And these functions are used to access different elements of the vector. The square bracket operator helps us use the vector just like an array, but it's unchecked access. The add function, it basically again lets you access an element inside an array using an index, but with bounds checking. It checks for indexes within the range of the array. So these are other functions. If you want to access the first element of the array, vector, this is a function called front, which lets you access the first element of the array. Back, which lets you access the last element of the array. And data will basically, I think it might return you the pointer to the internal storage that it is using to store all the elements. So iterators, I'll come to iterators in a moment, but let's see some other functionalities. So is a function which checks whether the container is empty or not. So it returns a boolean whether the container is empty or not. Empty when it does not have any element. So there's this thing that you need to know about. One is the size of the container. Size basically tells you the number of elements inside the container. Okay. So number of elements, and then there is another concept related to the storage for vector, which is its capacity. Okay. So let me just show you this. So this vector, as we said, it internally, it shrinks and expands based on the number of elements we add to it. So internally, it basically dynamically allocates this memory on the heap where it will store all these elements. So it has a pointer internally stored, which will be basically pointing to the memory it has allocated on the heap to store our elements. But the thing is, dynamic memory allocation or allocation of memory on the heap is relatively slow. Right? So it is not going to shrink and expand every time we add one element. Okay, that would make our program very inefficient because every time it will have to allocate new memory on the heap. So that is costly. So it does, to optimize things, what it does is, let's say when we create this vector, it, let's say, allocates memory for 100 elements in one go. Even if you have like inserted one element, it will allocate memory for 100 elements. And then basically this whole memory that is allocated for 100 elements, it is called its capacity. Current capacity is 100 elements. But it is not currently using all of its current capacity. Let's say we have inserted only one element in this vector. So it will be using space for only one element. The size of this vector will be one element, but the its capacity is 100 elements. So if we keep inserting or pushing back more elements, they will be added inside this already allocated memory. So it will not be allocating or accessing heap every time we insert an element. Okay? For 100 elements, it will not need to access the heap. So this way, our insertions will be more efficient or faster. Let's say once we have inserted 100 elements and then we insert the 101st element, then this capacity is no longer enough. Okay? So it needs to allocate more capacity. So what it will do is it will access the heap and allocate more capacity. Again, it will not allocate more space for one more element. Again, it will allocate like space for 200 elements. So it will double the size of the capacity of the vector. So again, the next 100 insertions will not need to access this heap, okay, and they will be faster. So just keeping in mind that heap access is slow, to make our vector efficient, we do not want it to allocate memory every time we insert an element. Okay, so that's why we use these allocations in bulk. So there you have the difference between the capacity and the size of the vector. The size of the vector is basically the number of elements that this container contains, and the capacity is the number of elements that can be held in currently allocated storage. Okay, so currently allocated storage means the memory that is allocated in bulk on the heap. Right? So if this capacity is too much, you can call this function shrink to fit, which will basically reduce the capacity to make it equal to the size of the vector. Is this difference between capacity and size clear? Okay, good. So let's see what other functions there are. So clear the contents, basically it clears, it will remove all the contents, I think. And then pushback we already saw, pop back also we saw. Resize of swap, I don't know whether they're important or not. So let me see if there is anything interesting. If you want to ask, I mean, if you find any function interesting, you can type it and we can read its description. So excuse me, I'm sorry. Okay, so I think these functions you can explore them on your own. If there's insert, it inserts. Okay, so the difference between insert and pushback will be pushback basically adds the element at the end of the vector, and insert, I think it will be adding an element in the middle of the vector. So let's see what this does. So insert, we give it a position and a value. So what it will do is, okay, so it inserts the value before the position. But that position is an iterator, so let us, I think, first study iterator and then we can talk about it. So standard library containers, they come with this concept of an iterator. Have you heard the word iterator before or something similar? In which context have you heard something similar to an iterator? Pointers are not as much directly related as iterators in a loop. So iterator in a loop is a very good example. So here we have a loop. We have on line number 11, let's say, we have this for loop. So the loop variable that we use to index the loop, this is called an iterator. So I is the iterator, and every execution of a loop is called an iteration. Okay, so iterator, iteration at least is the word that you must have already heard. So the iterator helps you go through the loop. So these standard libraries, they come in these containers, and many times you have to traverse these containers from start to end. Okay? So you can either use this functionality called I. For example, the std vector supports this array index. So we can use, for example, on line number 15, 16, it supports this array index square bracket operator. So we can use this functionality I is equal to 0, I less than size, I plus plus, and cout vi. Okay, so just like an array, we can use I, an integer, as an iterator. But this might not work for every container. Okay. So the containers, they come with this interface, which they call iterator, which is recommended or preferred to use when you want to traverse these operators. When you want to traverse these containers from start to end. So this, again, it's a class or it's a user-defined type. User-defined inside the standard library defines this type called iterator. And an iterator is basically associated with a particular container. So if you want to traverse a container, then first you get the iterator for that container. Okay? And then once you have got the iterator for that container, you can use that iterator to traverse that container. For example, if I want to traverse this vector, then first I need to get the iterator for that vector. Okay, because it matters, the iterator is also a template, so it has to be the same type as the type of the vector. So we get the iterator for that type of vector. For example, vector int, we get an iterator for vector int, and then we use that iterator to traverse that container. The advantage of using this iterator method over this method I is that this is a standard way and it works with every container. Every container supports an iterator. So it might happen if you want to use this I thing, it might work for certain containers and it might not work for other containers. But the iterator is the standard way of traversing containers, and it is guaranteed that if you have the proper iterator, you can access or traverse any container from start to end. So let's see how we can do the same thing, but this time with iterators. So we have pushed back, and now I have a vector containing these elements, and I want to traverse this vector using an iterator. So what I will do is I will first declare, instead of declaring an integer I, let me copy this just for comparison. Instead of declaring integer I will declare a iterator of vector integer is equal to, and this iterator is usually initialized to the first element of the what's it called, vector. We initialize I to 0 when we are using integers, but for iterators we need to basically get the iterator for the first element of the array. And how do we get the of the vector? How do we get the iterator for the first element of the vector? Basically, if you see these iterators, it gives you this function begin. Okay, so begin is like the first begin function will return the iterator for the first element of the vector. So let us see this description of this function begin. You see the return type of begin is an iterator. Okay. So this basically gives you the iterator for the first element of the vector. So let us call this function begin on our vector. So I initialize this vector to v.begin. Okay. So I have the iterator for the first the first element of the array vector, and then I will basically now put the condition. Okay, so condition normally with I I'll put I less than 10 or I less than size, etc. So for these iterators, again the vector contains another complementary function to begin, which is called end. So just like we had vector begin, we have also vector end. Okay, so end basically gives you an iterator not to the last element, but an iterator past the last element. Okay, the iterator after the last element. It is not the iterator of the last element, but end gives you the operator of the iterator of the one past the last element. So what is it pointing to? You don't need to worry about it. That's the implementation detail of the vector. As we know, implementation details are private and we do not need to concern ourselves with the implementation details. We need to only concern ourselves with the behavior, okay, the interface. And the vector interface specifies that and returns the basically iterator to an element past the last element. Okay, so when we put our conditions here, we will write it like this. Okay, so this is the type vector iteration, and we will give declare a variable of this type iterator. So let's start iter. Okay. So this vector and colon iterator, that's a type. Okay, it's a iterator type of the iterator of vector int. So I declare a variable of this type, which I assign to the first element, and then if I write it iter less than v dot end. Okay. V dot end, or usually it's written iter not is equal to v dot end. And then to move to the next element, to keep compatibility with the for loop or I++, the plus plus operator is overloaded for these iterators. Okay, so I can do iterator plus plus. So this will basically, and the plus plus operator is overloaded for these iterators. So it will move to the next element. So it might be that the next element is contiguous in memory, and it might be that the next element is not contiguous in memory. The next element is placed in some like 1000 bytes away. Again, how does the iterator move to the next element? That's an implementation detail. That's private. I don't need to concern with the implementation detail of iterator moving to the next element. Okay? That it has already been handled by the programmer who programmed this standard library. That programmer gave me an interface, the behavior. The programmer told me that if you do iterator plus plus, the iterator will go to the next element, wherever that element might be. The programmer says, I am responsible that it will go to the next element. You don't need to worry about the details. Those are implementation details. Those are private. So you just do plus plus, and as long as you follow this interface as is specified, you do plus plus on the iterator. The iterator will go to the next element, wherever that element is in RAM. Okay. So here it is like vector iterator is equal to v dot begin, gives me the iterator of the first element, and then basically I check the condition that until the iterator reaches past the last element, after every iteration, the iterator should move to the next element. And within every iteration, I will basically access this element that the iterator is referring to. And how do I refer to this element that iterator is pointing to? So I don't need to, basically here the syntax is like pointers, but the iterator might not exactly be a pointer. Okay, so how does the iterator accesses the exact element? Again, that is an implementation detail. But the interface is like a pointer. So if I want to access that element that this iterator is referring to, the currently, I use this pointer syntax, right? Okay. So it looks like dereferencing a pointer, but we are not, I mean, we can't assume that iterator is a pointer. Iterator is just an interface. For this interface, this dereference operator might be overloaded. Okay, so it might actually be a pointer, or it might not actually be a pointer. But again, that's an implementation detail. We don't need to worry about that. All we are given is this interface that if we dereference the iterator, whether it's a pointer or whether it's something else, the dereference operation will give us the value of the item that this iterator is referring to. Okay? And then we can use that thing in our loops. So this is basically the concept of the iterator. Every container comes with an iterator, and we can use these functions provided by the containers, begin, end, and these interfaces plus plus and dereference to basically traverse these iterators from start to end. So here let me basically print this, run this code I'll remove the rest of the code to concentrate on this. So let us try to run. You see, here it has basically, we have accessed all the vector, traversed the vector, accessing each element one by one. Okay? But this time we have done it using iterators. Okay? So iterator starts from the beginning by basically acquiring the iterator for the first element by using this begin function, and it continues using plus plus interface. It continues going through the next element until, as long as this iterator is not equal to the iterator returned by the function end, which is basically one past the last element. So as soon as this iterator becomes or moves past the last element, this condition will become false and this loop will stop. Okay? Otherwise, in every iteration, we access the element referred to by this iterator by using this dereference operator. Okay? So the operator looks like a dereference operator, but as I said repeatedly, that we cannot assume that iterator is a pointer. Okay, so iterator is a class or user-defined type. Is this clear, the concept of an iterator? Okay, so iterators can be used to read or write values. So let us write something in it. If how should I write something? Iterators can be used to write something. So let's say I want to modify something. Let's say apart from the iterator supports, I think iterator support these arithmetic operations. If it is iterator not equal to v.begin, okay, and iterator not equal to v.end -1. Okay, so apart from the first and the last element, let us make this, all the other elements, let us make them 55. Okay. So let's see what happens. No, it didn't work. What went wrong? If it is, get the hints down, and -1, and no, it's equal. It's not equal to. It's equal to. You see these kind of mistakes. So you see, we can access these iterators to read or write the values. So here I have written basically, apart from the first and last element, every other element I have basically reassigned the value 55 to all these elements of the vector. So what I wanted to tell you was that if you see here in the iterator descriptions, you have this function begin and cbegin. end and C end. So begin gives you an iterator, and C begin also gives you an iterator, but C begin gives you a constant iterator, which means that the iterator that you are returning you, it's a constant iterator, and if you try to modify this element value using this constant iterator, the compiler will give you an error. So this is good to basically make you, to avoid accidental mistakes. If you don't want to write the element, it is better to use a constant iterator instead of the usual iterator. Okay, because here on line number 21, I want to read this value. Okay, so it is possible that accidentally I might write this value like this, let's say plus plus. Accidentally I might change this value. Okay? So this here it will basically not give me an error. But if I knew that I was using, I was only going to read this value, I could have used a constant iterator. Okay, and I could have used the C begin and C end. So what would happen is here now it would give me an error. First let me do it without const just to show you that it does not detect the error and the value of the vector gets changed. So let's print it again to see that the value gets changed. So something went wrong. So this is good. Let me make sure that this thing, I think it's a problem of operator precedence. So it, instead of incrementing the value referred to by that iterator, it is incrementing the iterator. And that's why it was printing half the vector. So you see, I accidentally changed my value. And this kind of bugs, it can happen. So to prevent against these kind of bugs, I'm sure that here in this loop, line number 21, I am not going to modify this value. So from the start, I should have used const iterators. And this way, since I'm trying to modify something which is being referred to by a const iterator, it will give me an error. So you see, the compiler is not happy, and the compiler is saying that you are passing const iterator to this. So no, it's not this plus plus that it should give me conversion from to const iterator. Because it's for vector. So let me see what's the return type of cbegin. cbegin. It gives you a const iterator. So what's the syntax for const iterator? Okay, so since I'm not sure about the syntax, Okay, so it's const iterator, not iterator. Sorry, my bad. So you want to use a const iterator instead of an iterator. So const doesn't go there, but const goes here. So name of the iterator is const iterator. Okay. So you see now it is telling me that I am trying to increment or change a value which is being referred to by a const iterator. Because a const iterator is not meant to change things, it is only meant to read an iterator. So whenever you are only reading that element, it is better to use const iterator to prevent against accidental mistakes. It's just like const references when you pass it to a function or other const variables. So this is one thing, and then there's another thing that you guys can see here. We have begin, C begin that we have seen, and here we have R begin. So R begin basically returns a reverse iterator. Okay. So reverse iterator moves in the other direction. It starts from the end. So R begin will basically give you an iterator. So R begin gives you an iterator to the last element of the vector. Okay. And similarly, we have a corresponding R end, which gives you the iterator beyond the first element of the vector. Okay. So to traverse the vector in the reverse direction, we start from R begin and we go until the iterator becomes equal to R end. Okay, so if it becomes to R end, then we have already moved past the first element, so we need to stop. So we can do it in the reverse direction, printing. So iterator, again it's a constant, so let's move it. We are only reading, so let's use a constant iterator. You can use the iterator, simple iterator also, but as I said, since we are only reading, it's better to be safe. So instead of R begin and R end, okay, and the interface to move to the next element will be still plus plus. Okay, it will move to the next element, but in the reverse direction, since we are using the reverse operator, iterator. We don't need to do minus minus. Okay, so it's still plus plus because we need to go to the next element, although it's in the reverse direction. So either R begin or RC begin. Let me see. RCR begin. Sorry. Since we are using const, so the const iterator in reverse direction is CR begin. Oops. What happened? Since it's const iterator again, we would have made an error accidentally, you see. But now, operator not equals to no, but for operator not equal to CR and but plus plus we just remove plus plus. Sorry, it's const reverse operator. Oh, So reverse iterator, it should be specified. Okay. So all these iterators, since this functionality is different, they have names. Const reverse iterator. It's not happy again. Okay, so this was like the error that we were getting. Change the value, refer to by const operator. So you see this here, the last line, we can see that in the second last line, the vector is printed in the forward direction, and the last line, it basically prints the same vector but in the reverse direction. So it starts from the last element and then goes on until the first element. So we can traverse the vector in forward direction, backward direction using the forward iterators, backward iterators, okay, and you can either modify using normal iterators or just read them using const iterators in other direction. Okay, so these are the, basically this is the concept of the iterator, and these are functions which will be available for almost every iterator, at least a forward function, where you can basically traverse these iterators, containers in forward or backward direction. Is the concept of iterators clear? Every container provides you an iterator which you can use to traverse that container from start to finish in forward or reverse direction. Okay, so what else can we see here? Time. Okay, so we are almost at time. So what I can do is I can basically, I think perhaps introduce another small concept, small but important concept, that these in C++ we have, how many types of loops have you studied in C++? 3, which are for, while, do, while. Very good. Okay. So from C++ 11 onwards, there's another type of loop which is called range for loop. Yeah, range based for, it's called range for loop or range based for, which we have not studied yet. So these range for loops, they work with data types that support this concept of ranges. Okay, so concept of ranges we have not studied yet, but the you guys can just remember that these standard library containers, they support the concept of ranges. And if a container supports, or a user data type supports this concept of ranges, then you can use range for loops with these data types. So containers support ranges, so you can use range for loops with these containers. What does a range for loop looks like? It's like this. You see this printing this vector, we have been doing like this. Okay, so sorry, we have been doing it using this either int I is equal to 0, I less than size, or iterator is equal to begin, iterator not equal to end, etc., etc. So these are traditional for loops, which are good, but the traditional for loops, they have, first of all, they are long to write, their syntax is longer. Second, you have to check those boundary conditions and start, end, and you have to put a condition whether less than, greater than, less than, equal to. So in doing all this, there is a slight chance of making an error. You can either start from the wrong location or go until the wrong location, or instead of less than, you can use, by mistake, you can do less than equal to, or instead of less than equal to, you can do less than, etc. So there is a slight chance of making some slight error. So here you can see it basically gives you a variable int n and colon and this data type which support ranges. Okay, in this case it's a container vector. So it's just simple syntax like this. There is no start mention, no mention of end until where we want to go, no mention of less than or less than equal to, and no mention of plus plus, etc. How we want to increment. It's really that simple. So you give the variable and give it the variable n and this vector v, the data type that support ranges, in this case vector after the colon, and then you have the loop body. Okay. So loop body will be run every iteration. And what will happen is that it will basically take this data type which support this concept of ranges, say vector, and it will take all the elements of this data type vector one by one, and in every iteration it will basically assign the next element, the value of the next element, to this value n. Okay? So the type of n should be the type of the element of this vector. Okay, so for every iteration, it will take one element of this type from the vector, starting from the beginning, and it will assign the value of that element to this variable n. Okay. And then inside the iteration or loop body, we can basically do whatever you want to do with that element. Okay. So let us try to print our vector using this range for loop. Okay, so this was like printing it normally using iterators. You can see the syntax is long, etc. So what we can do is for range for int v, let's say n, just like an example, and we give it this vector, what's name, v. And then we can, instead of doing all this complicated syntax, we can do n. Okay, so this is a range for loop. It is really that simple syntax, and the chances of making an error exceeding the range, because there is no concept of like start index, end index, so there is no chance for us to access something beyond the boundary of the vector. Everything is handled internally by the vector, by this range for loop. So let us see. So you see, it is basically printing this last line, range for loop is printing this vector from start to end. One by one, every element's value is being assigned to this n, and inside the loop body, we can do whatever you want to do with n. So this is the syntax of the range for loop. Is it understandable, the syntax? Of range for loop? Okay, good. So if it is understandable, then let me ask you a question. Let me. So here, what we will do is let's do. So we printed as we were printing already, and then we do this n is equal to 44, and then we print the vector again. What do you think the last line, printed line, will be? Oh, sorry. I wanted to ask you guys. So, okay, so very good. Some of you answered. Good. So, it's not printing 44, 44. It's printing 11 at the same values, which means that assignment to n did not change the value of the element of the vector. What do you guys think is happening? Show the code. Sorry. You see, the wording I used was that in every iteration, it will take the element, I mean, of n, one element of v, and assign its value to n. And then inside that vector loop body, we can do whatever we want with the value of n. Yes, the vector value are being assigned to n, but not changing vector itself. Okay, so this means this n is copy of each element. Okay, so every n is a separate variable, it's a copy, and every time the value of each element of x, vector v is copied in n. Okay, so when we change n inside the body, we are changing the copy n, okay, not which is a separate variable, not the element of the vector. So how do we do it? If we want to change the elements of the vector, instead of using copy, we use a reference. Okay. So this way, n is not now a separate variable copy, but n is a reference variable. And reference variable, as we know, does not exist independently. A reference variable is always bound to some other variable. Okay. So in every iteration, this reference variable n, it will be bound to an element, this reference will be bound to one element of the vector v, and when we change the value using n, we will be changing the original element which is being which is the element of the vector v. Okay, so in this case n is not a copy. In every iteration n is a reference basically, and n is bound to the one element of that vector in every iteration. So let's try it again. On line number 32 and line number 39, n is a copy. But in line number 36, where we want to change, it's no longer a copy, but it's a reference. Okay, so this time the values of the vectors were changed because n was no longer a separate copy, but a reference which was referring to the element of the vector. Okay. And similarly here, if we want to here we are making a copy of n. We are making a copy of n, but sometimes the objects are so large that we don't want to make a copy of every element, because copying involves copy constructor, so everything is copied. It could be the objects are very large, containing lots of dynamic memory, so it could be the copy operation could be very costly. So we can use a reference here also. Okay. But again here the loop body is being used only to read a vector. And since we are using this reference, accidentally we might change the value of n, accidentally. To prevent against this, and if you don't want to make a copy, we can use a reference, but to prevent against accidental changes, since it's read-only access, we can use a const reference to that type of object. Okay? So this way, we are basically avoiding the copy, but at the same time ensuring that we don't accidentally change the values. To ensure read-only access, we are using const references. Okay? So copying can be, for large objects, copying can be costly. So this is how you guys use this range for loop. Okay? So range for loop, it might not work for everything, but it works for standard library containers at least. Okay? Because standard library containers support this range interface. Yes, so Talha, we don't specify any range because the concept of the range for loop is that the container itself internally contains all the information that is needed to determine its range. Okay, so the range for loop, it works with that implementation of the container in such a way that they collectively automatically do the work of this range calculation for you. So even the plus plus operator, going to the next element, you don't even have to specify that. That is also handled by the range for loop. So range for loop basically will execute the loop body for all the elements of the vectors, going from start to end. No, it can use with all the containers of the standard library. So we have only studied only one container, which is vector. In the next class, we'll study perhaps a couple of other containers like list and map. So let me see if we can have a link for study containers here somewhere. Containers library. So you have all these containers which are exist in C++ standard library. You have this vector, you have this array. This is the class array, which is different from the built-in array in C++. Okay, so again, the class array, it is somewhat like static array, the built-in array, but it's not dynamic. It does not change its size dynamically. Sorry, the advantage of vector is that it's like an array, built-in array, but dynamic also. Then you have this another container called deck, forward list, this list. We might study this list in the next class. And you have this set, map, multi-set. So we might study one of them, map. And then there are all these other containers that you can use inside your programs that are provided by the standard library. So we'll just discuss 2 or 3 of them. The rest you can explore on your own. But for all these containers, the range for loop works. Okay. So I think the vectors, we'll stop the vectors here. You can explore the rest of the functionality of the vectors on your own. The range for loop will work with all the containers. Any other question? No? Okay. So thank you very much. I'll stop the recording and let me take your attendance.